The wind came down off the high country like a bearer of old, unwelcome news. It moved across the land without permission, slipped through the cracks in doors and window frames, stole warmth from lamplight, and left behind a fine dust that settled on everything. The general store counter, the church bench, the tired eyelids of men who had learned to measure life in shortages. In that part of the West, even silence seemed coated in grit. The town was called Ash Hollow, a scatter of rough timber buildings raised near a creek that earned its name only when the rains were generous. It was a place of passage, kept alive by stubbornness, a little trade, a little cattle, and a kind of hope that persisted more from habit than conviction. On a map, Ash Hollow was nearly nothing. To those who lived there, it was the whole world. On an afternoon of low light, when the sky turned the color of lead and the sun felt too distant to promise anything, man came along the road with a mule and a narrow suitcase. He carried no property worth boasting of, showed no weapon as an announcement, and wore none of the easy smile that makes strangers relax. He wore a dark coat rubbed thin at the sleeves, a Bible at the bottom of his case, and an attentiveness that betrayed fatigue. His name was Reverend Jonah Caldwell. On paper, he was a preacher. In his heart, he was a man at war. He had come to replace a minister who had died the previous winter, taken by a fever no one could name with certainty. Folks said the old preacher had buried many and comforted few, because life there left little room for comfort that lasted. Still, the town had asked for another. Not everyone asked for faith. Sometimes they asked for order. Sometimes they asked for a ritual that reminded them they were still human. Jonah dismounted in front of the small wooden chapel. It leaned slightly, as if tired of standing. The door groaned when touched. The bell had not been rung since the last minister's funeral. Beside it lay a graveyard of uneven crosses, some without names, some with names so worn by weather they looked like requests to be forgotten. Jonah stood for a moment, studying those crosses. Doubt did not arrive as a clean thought. It came as a physical weight beneath his ribs. He had preached in smaller settlements, in railroad camps, on isolated farms where loneliness lived in every corner. He had seen hunger and grief, but Ash Hollow held a different kind of brutality, not the loud kind, but the steady kind, the kind that asked nothing of a man except that he endure until he no longer expected relief. In such a place, faith could feel like a candle held out in the open wind. He opened the chapel door and stepped inside. The air smelled of old wood and kerosene. The pews were split and scarred. Wax stains lay on the floor like small graves of light. On the pulpit, a large Bible rested open, but its pages had warped with dampness, as if the very word had grown tired under the climate. Jonah set his suitcase down, removed his hat, and offered a short prayer, not out of habit, but because he felt the need to hold on to something. "Lord," he murmured, "if I am still on your road, show me." Silence answered in the way silence often does, without haste and without explanation. A town that needed God, yet lived as if he were far off. The next morning, Jonah walked the main street. There was a mercantile, a blacksmith shop, a boarding house with a porch, a modest saloon, and a few scattered homes. The road was hard-packed dirt, marked by wagon wheels and hoofprints. The wind raised small dust spirals that wandered like children without guidance. People watched him with caution. The frontier taught men not to trust quickly, not even a man with a collar. Inside the store, Mrs. Harrow kept a thick ledger of debts. Her hands were strong, her face set by years of managing want, and her eyes were not in the habit of offering kindness for free. "You're the new preacher," she said, not asking. "I am," Jonah replied. Jonah Caldwell. She measured him the way she measured flour. "This town doesn't need pretty sermons," she said. "It needs someone who shows up when there's a burial." Jonah felt the bluntness of it. It was not meant to wound. It was a request stripped down to necessity. "I will show up," he said, for burials and for the rest. Mrs. Harrow turned a page in her ledger. We'll see. At the blacksmith shop, Eli Denton hammered iron with a rhythm that sounded like prayer without words. He glanced at Jonah as if weighing him. The last minister spoke a great deal about providence, Eli said. Then he died like any other man. Jonah answered carefully. Death is not proof that God fails. Eli exhaled through his nose. It's proof nobody out here is special. Jonah did not argue. He had learned that theological arguments rarely filled a belly or warmed the night. At the boarding house, Lydia Crane offered Jonah a plain room and meals in exchange for labor, mending pews, hauling wood, helping wherever needed. Don't be startled by the quiet, Lydia told him as she handed him a key. Folks here keep their words the way they keep water. Jonah thanked her, and he understood. Ash Hollow was not a town without faith. It was a town with faith that had been injured. That afternoon, Jonah visited the graveyard and tried to read the names. Some were still clear. Others had been worn away by weather until the letters looked like faint scratches. He wondered how many prayers rose from a land like this and met no answer a man could recognize. How many were repeated simply so the heart would not give up altogether? That night, Jonah opened his Bible and tried to shape a sermon about hope. Yet the word hope felt in that cold room, too delicate for hands made rough by necessity. He closed the book and watched the lamplight. His first serious doubt arrived not as denial, but as a simple, honest question. What if I have nothing to offer except words? He tried to pray, and with a quiet shame, he realized the prayer felt dry. The winter that never ended inside people? Before long, Jonah was called to his first funeral in Ash Hollow. A small child had died after a cough that worsened quickly. There was no shouting, no dramatic collapse, only the kind of stillness that comes when grief is too tired to announce itself. Jonah entered the modest home where the body lay beneath a clean sheet. The mother, Mary Klein, had reddened eyes but a face set like stone that had been rained on for years. The father, Thomas Klein, stood with his hands closed, as though holding something he could not set down. Jonah approached slowly. I am so sorry, he said, and the words felt too small. Mary did not weep then. She only asked, softly, Do you think God sees? The question pierced Jonah's own doubt. He could have answered with doctrine. He could have offered rehearsed comfort. But he looked at her and understood she was not seeking a lesson. She was seeking truth. I believe he sees, Jonah said, and I believe he grieves with what harms his children. Thomas lifted his eyes hard. Then why does he allow it? The question held no theatrics, no cruelty, only the edge of a man trying to cut a rope that was strangling him. Jonah felt something inside him give way. He thought of the answers he had learned, of verses and teachings about mystery and purpose. But in front of a father without his child, those words felt like thin paper held up to fire. So Jonah spoke plainly. I do not know, Thomas, he said. I do not know why some losses come like this. I only know that if God is anywhere, he is here too, in this room, and that we must hold one another when the sky feels far away. Thomas's jaw tightened, as if rejecting and accepting at once. Mary closed her eyes, and a single tear finally fell. Silent, the chapel filled for the burial. Jonah read a psalm in a calm voice. He spoke of rest, mercy, of a love not measured by seasons. Yet as he spoke, part of him watched from a distance and wondered whether he was only lending sound to other people as despair. When it ended, there was no applause. No one expected it. People simply nodded and went out. But Mary stayed behind, and as she passed Jonah, she touched his hand briefly. Thank you for not lying, she said. The words wounded and healed him in the same breath. That night, Jonah returned to the empty chapel and sat on the front pew. The wood was cold through his clothing. He listened to the wind worry at the walls. His faith had not vanished, but it was tired. And tired faith is dangerous, because it tries to protect itself by becoming habit. Jonah whispered to himself like a confession, "Lord, I came to carry light, and I am afraid of going out, the man with power and the town with hunger." A conflict began to gather in Ash Hollow, like a fire that had not yet shown smoke. A man named Wade Ransom had arrived recently, claiming he had come to organize safety in the region. He was the sort who spoke of order with the same mouth that enjoyed fear. He was not a storybook outlaw. He was more dangerous than that. A man who presented himself as necessary. He began collecting protection fees from shopkeepers and ranchers. He called them voluntary contributions. Those who hesitated received a visit in the night, and by morning found broken locks, scattered stock, or other trouble that left no clean proof for a distant sheriff. No spectacle-only pressure. Mrs. Harrow was among the targets. Jonah realized it when he saw her counting coins with a look of contained defeat. "They are demanding payment," Jonah said, not as a question. She did not look up. "They are demanding it from everyone. Will you pay?" Mrs. Harrow shut her ledger with a sharp motion. "I will do what I must to keep what I have," she said. "You are a preacher. Preach, then. But do not ask me to be a martyr." Jonah felt the hard truth in her words. Morality in the West was often a choice between different losses. He tried to speak with Wade Ransom. He found him in the saloon, seated with the calm of a man who believed the town belonged to him. Jonah approached without aggression. "I have heard you are taking money from people," Jonah said. Wade looked at him and smiled without warmth. "Reverend, I do not take. I offer peace of mind. Peace costs. Peace cannot be purchased with fear," Jonah replied. Wade tilted his head. "You speak like a man who has never lain awake while thieves work the dark," he said. "I do what distant government does not." Jonah felt anger rise and forced it down. He did not want violence. He did not want to give Wade the honor of a spectacle. "You know it is wrong," Jonah said quietly. Wade laughed once. "Wrong is a word for men with time for philosophy," he said. "Out here the word is survival." Jonah stepped out into the street with his stomach knotted. He wanted to believe preaching courage and justice would be enough. But in the faces of the townspeople, he saw something stronger than cowardice. He saw exhaustion. And the doubt returned harsher now. If God is justice, why is injustice so efficient? At night the preacher nearly failed. The tension came to a point when Thomas Klein, already broken by grief, was pressured to pay. He refused not from bravery, but from emptiness. Refusal was its own form of desperation. By morning, Thomas's horse was found far off, frightened and spent, as though it had run all night. There was no visible injury, no gore, no clean proof, only the message, "I can take what little you have left." Thomas stormed into the store with hollow eyes and trembling hands. "I will kill him," he said, low, as if the decision had already been made. Jonah was there buying nails to repair the chapel pews. He heard those words and felt the ground shift. "Thomas," Jonah said, "steady. Do not do it." Thomas looked at Jonah as though looking at a man who had never understood hunger. "What do you want me to do?" he whispered. "Pray? I prayed when my child was coughing. I prayed when my wife cried. Now I pray only so I do not lose my mind, and the man is still there." For a moment, Jonah had no answer. Not because he lacked words, because words felt like an insult. He led Thomas outside, away from listening ears. The wind pushed hard against them. "If you do this," Jonah said, "you will carry it all your days, and your wife will lose you too, even if you keep breathing." Thomas gave a bitter laugh. "And if I do nothing, I lose everything anyway." Jonah felt the brutal truth. The West often offered choices where every path hurt. He looked back toward the chapel and its leaning graveyard. He felt his own fear, raw and real. And then inside him, something shifted not his faith entirely, but his willingness to play the part of a good man at any cost. "Listen," Jonah said, "I will speak to the ranchers south of town. I will speak to Eli Denton. We will send for the county sheriff. We will gather statements. We will do it the right way." Thomas's fists tightened. "The right way is slow," he said. "Fear is fast." Jonah answered with a surprising honesty. "I am afraid as well," he admitted. "But I will not let you become what you hate." Thomas breathed hard. Jonah thought he might shove him away. Instead, Thomas turned his face and wept the sound of a man who did not wish to cry, but had nowhere left to put the grief. Jonah rested a hand on his shoulder, not as a saint, as a man. That night, Jonah returned to the chapel and fell to his knees, not from habit, but from exhaustion. He confessed in a whisper that only the pulpit heard, "Lord, I no longer know what is your will and what is my fear. I do not know if I came to save anyone or to be broken beside them." The lamplight trembled. The pulpit's shadow looked enormous. Jonah felt the dangerous urge to leave, to find a place where faith was easier to keep. Then he remembered Mary's words, "Thank you for not lying." And Jonah understood something simple and devastating. Perhaps his work there was not to bring answers. Perhaps it was to remain when no one had answers. A moral choice that never makes legends. Jonah gathered the town's men and women without calling for bravado. He called for responsibility. On Lydia Crane's porch one cold evening, he spoke with a small group. Eli Denton, Mrs. Harrow, Thomas Klein, and a few ranchers who still had enough margin to risk being seen. "He feeds on isolation," Jonah said, "on each person afraid in his own corner. If we stand together, he loses part of his power." Eli scratched his beard. "Standing together does not stop him from breaking things in the night." "It does not," Jonah admitted, "but it stops the lie that each of you is alone. And when the sheriff comes, he will find one story told with one voice, not scattered pieces that can be ignored." Mrs. Harrow's eyes hardened. "And if the sheriff does not come?" Jonah swallowed. "Then we continue," he said. "We write it down. We send word. We do not give him an excuse for tragedy. We do not let him turn us into monsters." Thomas Klein narrowed his eyes. "You are asking me to swallow humiliation," Jonah answered, firm but human. "I am asking you to choose a humiliation that does not destroy your soul. I have seen men do wrong in the name of justice and never sleep again. The West takes enough from a man. Do not hand over what is left inside you." Silence followed. Then Lydia spoke quietly. "I have seen preachers who ask for easy courage," she said. "You are not asking for that. You are asking for staying." Jonah nodded. "Yes," he said, "staying." That night they kept discreet watches, not to hunt Wade, but to protect one another, to keep fear from working unseen. Lanterns burned here and there. Doors were reinforced with shared hands. People who had been solitary stepped closer together. And for the first time, Jonah felt his faith do something real. Not explain suffering, but keep it from becoming total loneliness. A confrontation without glory. Wade Ransom sensed the change. He did not need rumor. Change has a scent. It has a rhythm. It has fewer people walking alone at night. He came to the chapel on a Sunday during service. He kept his hat on, a quiet provocation. He stood in the back with his arms crossed, looking over the congregation like a man counting heads. "Reverend," he said, "you are encouraging the town to meddle in matters too large for it." Jonah kept his voice calm. "I am reminding them they are a town," he said, "not scattered houses living on fear." Wade tilted his head. "You think your Bible keeps out hunger? Keeps out cold?" "It does not," Jonah said. "But it keeps hunger from becoming permission for cruelty." Wade stepped closer. "Watch your words." Jonah's heart hammered. Fear was there. But above fear was the knowledge that retreat would teach the town to bow again. "I am watching them," Jonah said. "That is why I speak calmly, so you have no excuse for spectacle." Wade looked around and met the town's eyes. They were not heroic eyes. They were tired eyes that had decided not to kneel anymore. For a moment, Wade's smile faltered. He backed away, adjusted his hat, and said, "This is not finished." Jonah answered quietly, "I know. Things like this rarely end quickly." Wade left. Jonah trembled inside, but he showed none of it. After the chapel emptied, Mary Klein approached him. "You are afraid too," she said softly. Jonah nodded. "I am." "Then why do you stay?" Jonah considered the question, and his answer came plain. "Because someone must." And as he said it, he realized something bitter. He had become like the men he respected, not by strength, but by necessity. It hurt, but it was honorable. The morning after, and a different kind of faith, weeks later, the county sheriff arrived with 2 men. Not from sudden kindness, but because the letters had piled up, and the county also had an interest in appearing just. Wade Ransom was not hauled away with drama. There was no duel, no celebration. There were papers, harsh conversations, and the kind of retreat men like Wade make when the risk grows too costly. He rode out at dawn without looking back. The town did not win the way stories say towns win. The town simply breathed again. And that is how many real victories look. Quiet relief without music. That morning, Jonah walked to the graveyard. The wind was gentler, the sun pale. He stopped beside a small cross with no name Mary and Thomas's child, buried before life could make sense. Jonah laid a hand on the wood as if touching a question. Mary came up beside him, a simple shawl around her shoulders. "Do you still believe?" she asked. There was no accusation in it, only the same hunger for truth as before. Jonah drew a slow breath. "I do," he said. "But differently than I once did." Mary waited. "I used to think faith was certainty," Jonah continued. "A clean answer. Here I have learned faith can be nothing more than walking on when the road explains nothing. It can be holding someone's hand and not letting go. It can be saying, 'I do not know,' and still staying." Mary looked at the cross. "That sounds like very little." Jonah nodded. "It is little," he said, "and it still costs everything." Mary was silent for a time. "You did not save my child," she said at last. Jonah felt the blow and did not deny it. "No, but you—" She searched for a word. "You kept my husband from losing himself completely." Jonah closed his eyes briefly. It was not triumph. It was the only mercy available. "I nearly lost myself as well," he admitted. Mary's gaze softened with a sadness that was gentle. "Maybe that is why you understand," she said. Jonah did not answer. There was nothing to add. As they walked back toward town, Jonah realized his doubt had not vanished. Perhaps it never would, but it had changed. It was no longer an enemy trying to destroy him. It was a reminder of human limits. And in a land where pride killed as surely as hunger, admitting limits was a kind of righteousness. A brutal land, and the ministry that can exist there. The West was raised on wood, iron, sweat, and distance. It was raised on grief as well, on letters that never arrived, on children who fell ill too quickly, on men who mistook hardness for virtue because tenderness felt dangerous. It was a place where law often arrived later than wrongdoing, and where morality was tested not in grand battles, but in small decisions made when no one was watching. A preacher in such a world was not a man of perfect answers. He was a man placed before other people's suffering with empty hands, trying not to turn faith into a lie. Jonah Caldwell arrived in Ash Hollow, believing he carried light in his pocket. He learned that light there required daily labor, feeding a lamp, shielding the wick from wind, accepting that the flame would tremble. He learned that brutality was not only in weapons and threats, but in the slow wearing down of people until they stopped expecting anything better. And yet, in that hard place, he saw something that did not fit inside cynicism. People who chose not to become worse. A blacksmith who lent strength without ceremony. A storekeeper who kept accounts and still shared salt when it was scarce. A wounded father who chose not to hand his soul over to despair. A small community that learned, for a time, to stand close together. The human cost of the Old West was high, and it cannot be measured only by graves. It is measured by what people had to harden to survive, and what they lost inside themselves simply to keep breathing. But it is also measured by what they refused to lose. The ability to look at suffering and refuse to call it normal. Jonah did not leave Ash Hollow as a saint. He left as a man still carrying doubts, now carrying them honestly, with invisible scars and a faith less bright but more true. A faith that did not promise suffering had a clean purpose, but insisted no one should have to endure it alone. In the West, that was already much, and perhaps that is the quiet lesson of that land. Not that faith eliminates brutality, but that when brutality tries to turn everyone to stone, there remains a kind of courage humble, daily, uncelebrated, and continuing to be human.